As always, we will start with the Patanjali Prayer. So let's listen.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi.
Thank you. That's a wonderful prayer. We already explained the meaning of this prayer, but if you can contemplate upon the meaning, it's our tradition always to start with paying respect to the teacher. So this is a prayer of Patanjali. So welcome to session 7. Very slowly but steadily we are proceeding. In the first 4 sessions, we talked about the introduction to Yoga Sutra, yoga, and how all these things fit together. And last 2 sessions, every day we cover one verse. Like first we cover the first sutra, covered first sutra in a session, and then in the next session we covered the second sutra. So today I propose to cover sutras 3 and 4. And after that, we will pick up the pace. So what I'm planning to do is covering on the average 3 sutras. But prior to that, this background is pretty much required. So that's why we took our own time and started very slowly. So we covered up to Sutra 2. The first sutra was the statement of intent. Patanjali said, now I'm going to start the yoga, which is basically not a new teaching, but a systematic compilation of the ancient Vedic teaching for the committed students. So that's what the first sutra was. And in the second sutra, he defined the entire yoga. The vision of the entire yoga was brilliantly defined or comprehended in the second sutra. So if you remember the second sutra, let me take 2 minutes and just recap so that you are all clear with that. And any questions, please keep it at the end. We have 30 minutes. We can always discuss that in detail. But please make sure that this sutra you understood properly, because everything else is an elaboration of this sutra. So the second sutra clearly defines the yoga as Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. So if you really think about that, last week we tried was, we took each of these words individually. So what is Chitta? We had a comprehensive discussion. It is the entire mind, which has 3 components per the Sankhyan metaphysics. The 3 components of Chitta are Manaha, which is the coordinating faculty. Every means that coordinates all the activities of sensory inputs, intellect, and the individuality, everything. So that is the mind or Manaha. Then Buddhi, which is the intelligence, which gives definite direction to the thoughts and feelings. And then there is a component called Ahankara, which gives your individuality. So each of these put together is known as Chitta. And the Chitta is not a static state. At any point of time, the Chitta gets modified, right? When I see a dog or a cat, what happens? A dog vritti or a cat vritti comes to my Chitta. It's equated like a ripple in a pond. So some of these means will be very difficult or a big modification. Some of them will be a small modification. Some of these modifications would be conducive to us, and some of these modifications would be problematic to us. The challenge is, the biggest challenge highlighted in the sutra is, these modifications are great, but at this point of time, I do not have control over these modifications. If the modifications are aligning with my interest, that is definitely good for me. But nobody knows what thoughts comes to my mind. And I do not have control over that mental activities. So the first step in yoga is, how can I gain control over my mind? So the first stage of Chitta Vritti Nirodha is ability to gain mastery over my mental activities. And mind you, this is not just needed for the spiritual pursuits. Whatever profession you do, you need to have that mind control. Without that control over the mental activities, I cannot perform well in the world. I cannot experience the happiness around me. I cannot listen to the people. I cannot understand people. So if I need to transact in this world, I need to gain control over my mind, because that is the greatest powerful instrument given to me. And now the problem is, without that mental control, it is like a car, you're driving a car without control over the wheels. So how do you control? So if you really think about the first sutra, we heard that Vyasa, the great commentator, said, these mental modifications can put the mind into 5 different states. One is called Chitta, which is kind of a destructive mental state, which is not conducive. So the first stage of Chitta Vritti Nirodha means I wanted to gain and eliminate all the Chitta Vrittis. Whatever is the situation, even if the world is coming to an end, my mind should not be in that Chitta state, because it is neither good for me nor good for the people around. So that's the first stage of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Second stage is the Mudha Vritti Nirodha, the deluded state. That is also not good. And then the third stage is distracted or vikshipta. So I wanted to eliminate these Chitta Vrittis, Mudha Vrittis. I wanted to transform these distracted state into a focused state. So that is Chitta Vritti, Mudha Vritti, Vikshipta Vritti will be moved to Ekagra Vritti. Ekagra Vritti means I'm meditating an object, or I'm focused. My mental activities are entirely focused on a particular object. This is Ekagra Vritti. And finally, what Patanjali is leading us is, even when you are in Ekagra, right, you do not know your true nature, who you are versus what you have. See, the mind is an instrument given to you to transact with the world outside. But you cannot differentiate. Typically, when you are in a situation, when you get an emotion, you feel that you are that emotion. I am angry. That is even the common usage. I am sad. But the fact is that the sadness is a vritti happening in you. So how do you objectively step back and look at those emotions and thoughts and the mental activities? For that, you need to recognize yourself as different from all the mental activities. So the technique employed in the Raja Yoga school or the Patanjali school is, with that great mastery over the mind, you are suspending the modifications of the mind for a period of time. We talked about the example of a projection to a screen. When movie is projected, you cannot recognize the actual light that is illuminating the film. So the best thing is to do is stop the projection for a time. So you see the blank screen and you see the light. So then you realize that, oh, it is the light that shows all the movie. So like that, when the consciousness do not have anything to illuminate, the consciousness will recognize itself as the true identity. So this is the ultimate goal of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And when you reach that state, that type of samadhi is known as asamprajnata samadhi. Again, I told you, don't worry if you don't get this whole idea, because the entire Yoga Sutra is going to talk about this again and again and again. So right now means we are in the topic between Sutra 2 and 4. We are defining what is yoga. So that is where we are in the overall scheme of things. And we saw the first sutra, which is the statement of intent. And also we saw the second sutra, which is yoga is the mastery and eventually the suspension of the mental modification. So we were up to this in the previous session, and now we are proceeding. So today what we are trying to see is, if you are able to attain this state of yoga, which is the mastery and eventually the suspension of the mental activities, what do you get? And if you cannot reach this state, if you cannot have mastery or the control over your mental activities, what is the problem? So what is the benefit of having your true identity? And what is the problem of not having your true identity? So those are the two different scenarios presented in Sutra 3 and 4. And thereafterwards, we are getting into the details. Details means how many types of vrittis are there? How do you gain control over it? What are all the challenges? How do you overcome that? It becomes so practical. So that's the introduction. So with that, let's go to the third sutra. The third sutra is, let's listen to the sutra first.
Tada drastuh svarupe avasthanam.
Each of these sutra is like a mantra. So we need to understand that properly. Tada. Tada means then. That's all here means. Tada. Drastuh. Drastuh means the seer or the experiencer. Avasthanam. Avastha means state. Avasthanam means established or abide. Where? Svarupe, your true nature. So the sutra tells, then means when you gained the Chitta vritti nirodha. Because remember, it's a continuation of the second sutra. So when you gain the Chitta vritti nirodha, what happens is you will establish, or the seer will establish in its true nature. So what if you could do that Chitta vritti nirodha? So when you do, means when you complete the Chitta vritti nirodha, when you attain the Chitta vritti nirodha, the yourself, the seer, is established in its own nature. That's the meaning of the sutra. But being sutra, we need to follow the same style. We need to unpack each of these verses, and we need to understand the meaning, and then we need to understand the holistic meaning. So let's go. So let's start with the drastuh, the first word. Tada drastuh svarupe avasthanam. These are the 4 words in the sutra. So let's start with drastuh, the second word. Drastuh literally means, drashta means seer. Drastuh means the one who sees. In other words, seer. Drishti means eye or the object. So drish means to see. Drastuh means the subject who sees. Now we need to pause here and try to understand the yogic psychology a little bit. Per yoga, who is the real seer in an experience? The question is, you know that, how do you see? We all see with our sense organs, eyes. That's for sure. So when I say that I see a flower, is the eye is the seer? Question. Or I know that even though I see an image of the flower outside through the eye, my mind has that image. So who is the real seer? Is it mind? Or is it the consciousness? This is the first question. So when you talk about drastuh, what is that the word drastuh indicates or points to? Is that sense organs, or is that mind, or is that the consciousness? So please keep your focus. This is not an abstract concept. You can understand this very properly if you pay attention. So please pay your attention and ask questions if you have any questions. So now we have to do a little bit more detailed analysis of the seer and the seen at the different levels. So let's take the example of I am seeing a flower. So the flower is outside of my body, right? And through my eyes, I see the flower. So this is the level 1 perception or the seeing. So in this particular case, the object, the seen is the flower, and the seer is my eyes. I don't have to talk about the basic biology, but you all know that what happens. The lens in the retina captures the image of the flower. So in fact, I can say that on a high level, my eye is the seer and the flower is the seen. But if you go to the next level, right, it's not a big science. Everybody has learned this in your basic biology classes in schools. What eye is like a sensor only. Like your computer has a sensor, like a camera. The eye is only like that. What is captured by the eye will be sent to your visual cortex in your brain or in your mind. So if you go to the second level, the image, the tilted image captured by both the eyes is the seer, and your mind is the, that is the seen, and the mind is the seer. So your brain or your mind sees what is captured by your eyes. Mind you, your mind is not directly seeing the flower. The eyes will capture the image of the flower, and that image is seen by the mind. So in the second level of perception, what happens is the seer is the image captured by the eyes, and the seen is the image captured by the eyes, and the seer is the mind. So if there is a problem with your eyes or your transmitters, what happens? Even though the flower is accurate in the external world, you may not see it properly. For example, if you have color blindness, the flower outside might be beautiful. It is multicolored, but you won't see that. So in other words, where I would like you to pay your attention is, you need to understand that what your mind sees is not exactly the world outside, but it's the image captured, or it is the sound captured by my ears. It is the smell captured by my nose. It's not the actual external smell the mind sees. Of course, the sense organs are scanners. They will capture the images or the sounds or the touch from the external world. But the mind captures what is captured by the sense organs. So here is the problem. As I said, like if the sense organs are not functioning properly, even though you have a fully functioning mind, you won't experience that fact. So level 1, external objects is the seen, the sense organs, the eye is the seer. The second level, the what is seen by the eye is the seen, and the mind is the seer. Now, when the mind gets that input, what happens? It creates a mental representation of the image captured from the external world. So in this particular example, first level, the image, an optical image of the eye is captured by the eyes, and that is being sent to the mind, and eventually that optical image is represented as a mental representation in your mind. Now, who sees that mental representation? That's what the consciousness is, right? So when there is a mental representation of the flower in my mind, what happens? The consciousness can recognize that. And that is the definition of the Vedantic yogic definition of consciousness. It's not exactly the definition of the neuroscience definition of consciousness. So the definition of consciousness in Vedanta and yoga is that by which you are aware of your mental activities. Please pause for a second and note this definition very well, because without this definition, nothing will be clear. So that by which you are aware of your mental activity is our definition of consciousness. So the consciousness gives awareness to mental activity. So that's where I feel that, okay, I'm aware of that flower. So it goes through 3 different steps. First, the external object is physical image is converted into an optical image by my eyes. That optical image is sent to your mind, and that is represented as a mental representation in your mind, a chitta vritti. And means the consciousness in me is observing the chitta vritti. Clear? This is very important. So these 3 levels of perception. So who is the real seer? On level 1, it is the eyes. Level 2, it is the mind. And level 3, which is the ultimate, The consciousness is the real seer. And what exactly the consciousness is seeing? The consciousness is not seeing the external image. The consciousness is not seeing directly the optical image. The consciousness is seeing only the mental representation of the image. So all these steps are important. That is what we will see next. So this is the whole process. So level 1, it is the sense organs. So the sense organs perceives the external world of objects. And mind you, that perception is limited by the limitation of the sense organs. For example, if you have an issue with the eardrums, in spite of going through a big fireworks, you may not hear anything, right? So that is why your ability to perceive is entirely depending upon the capacity of your sense organs. That is level 1. Level 2, which is the eye of the eye, mind, or the ear of the ear. Kena Upanishad, one Upanishad brilliantly defines like that. What is mind? It is the eye of the eye. The mind means the ear of the ear, etc. So what does that mean? The mind perceives the perception of the sense organs. If I use the scientific language, the external object is captured as an optical image by the eye. That optical image is seen by the mind. So the mind views that optical image. So the mind cannot perceive the world directly. Very important point. The mind cannot perceive the world directly, but it sees what is being captured by my sense organs. So these sense organs are gateways through which the mind sees the world. Right? And also what happens? When I see an image, mind also adds some additions and deletions to that mental activity. For example, when I see a hibiscus or a rose, oh, some nice feeling comes to me because of my memories and my samskaras. When I see a particular person, oh, love comes to me because it is my daughter or my loved one. And when I see some other people, some anger comes to me. So what happens is the mental image created by the visual system is even enhanced by the mind by adding emotions and additional thoughts. So think about this. It's a complex process. Imagine that somebody is singing on a stage. My eyes will capture the whole singing, right? And the image means the sound will capture, all the ears will capture all the music otherwise. And since I'm sitting on a seat, my skin will capture the sense of touch, right? And if there are some nice perfumes in the auditorium, my nose will capture that. So at any point of time, what happens in my mind is a collective, consolidated representation of all the mental activities, plus a collective representation of all the mental activities, plus the emotions and the thoughts added by my mind. This is what is seen by the consciousness. This consolidated chitta vritti, the modification of the mind, is what is observed by the consciousness. This is very important. So the means 2 points to take away, right? The real drastuh highlighted in this verse is the consciousness. And what exactly the consciousness is observing? Only chitta vrittis. Do you know why the second sutra highlighted chitta vritti nirodha? Because that is what you need to master. Irrespective of what happening in the world, my chitta vrittis determines my experience. If I want it to be efficient, my chitta vrittis needs to be appropriate. So if a person who has good chitta vrittis, he leads a good life. On the other hand, if the chitta vrittis are not conducive, in the Sutra 1.5 you see, right? Some of these chitta vrittis are klishta and some of them are aklishta. Some of them are going to lead me to the good. Some of them are lead me away from the good. Some of them are good for my growth. Some of them put me down. The reason is at any point of time, irrespective of what is happening in the world outside. My direct experience is Chitta Vrittis, and that Chitta Vrittis controls my emotions, feeling, and thoughts and experience at any given point of time. And the experiencer is the consciousness, because the consciousness directly sees that, and the consciousness only sees the Chitta Vritti. So that's why the mind is a very powerful instrument. So it's like a screen. As I said, if you think about that screen, that will be a good example. So what is happening in the external world will have one feed that will be projected to the screen, and that will be colored by my samskaras, and I am seeing that consolidated feed at any point of time. And I need to master this. So this is very important topic we covered. Who is the real seer? The word drastuh. And now this is how it works, right? So the external body is there. It has perceptions and actions. It will be input to the mind, and mind will represent every experience as a Chitta Vritti. Symbolically, I put ripples like a lake. So if the mind is like a lake, the ripples are the Chitta Vrittis, and the consciousness directly sees those Chitta Vrittis. And this is how the experience. And the consciousness is the real seers, and the body and the minds are only instruments. This is very important to understand, because the whole yoga is based on this model. This is the basic model to understand the yoga. So this is the word drastuh. So in other words, in summary, we said drastuh is only the consciousness. So the first word of the sutra is Tada drastuh svarupe avasthanam, right? That was the sutra. So tada means then. Then means in a state of Samadhi or in a state of Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Think about that. So when you have mastery and eventually the suspension of the Chitta Vritti, what exactly is the ripples happening in that pond? I do not have, I have complete control. I know what ripples needs to happen. If I want to suspend all the modification, I have the ability to suspend. And for that to happen, my mental condition should be, my mind should be pure, because if it is dirty, I cannot gain that control. Last week we talked about that. So the mental condition, the mind, the content of the mind would be pure, and the mind would be calm, and it will be fully controlled. This is the mental condition. And the qualities of the mind, if you really think about this, it will be dominated by sattva. Last week we talked about the 3 gunas. Sattva means that is the natural quality of the mind. It is the creative quality of the mind. It is the positive of the quality of the mind. So this is the situation. So then means when you have done the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, you are in a very good state. So let's try to delve a little bit more. So when you achieve this Chitta Vritti Nirodha, so the practice of yoga will take you to Samadhi. That is what the eventual goal. So initially, the mental modifications are controlled, right? Think through that whole process. Vikshipta vrittis are avoided, mudha vrittis are avoided, and initially you will be taken to the focused state, and finally the mastery state, and eventually if you need, you can suspend the mental activity. And when you suspend this mental activity, what is going to happen? The commentators Vyasa and Vijnana Bhikshu adds a lot of questions here. So when you say that you are suspending your modification of the mind in your seat of meditation, what does that mean? This elimination of mental modification, is that an elimination of yourself completely? Is this an existential suicide? No. Yoga tells, when you suspend your mental activity, what is going to happen, right? So the sutra, that is the next word, svarupe avasthanam. The sutra tells, when you are freed from the association or the modifications of the mind, the purusha means the consciousness, can recognize itself, because otherwise what is going to happen? The consciousness always misidentify itself. A beautiful example is given in our scriptures. Look at the image of a crystal. What is the color of that crystal, honestly speaking? It is pure and white, and it is transparent. But if it is always placed in front of a flower or in front of a cloth, when you look at this crystal, how does the crystal appears to you? The external color will be superimposed on the crystal. The external color will be superimposed on the crystal. So even though the crystal is autonomous and entirely separate from the blue cloth in front of it, vicinity, and it is transparent, but when the cloth presents, if you do not know the real nature of this crystal, the crystal appears as blue to you always. This is exactly what the chittas and the vrittis does to you. Before you realize the fact that you are the purusha or the consciousness, these mental activities, the frustrations, the anger, the jealousy, all these mental activities, it means you get identified with that mental activity. There is a beautiful book on meditation and the meditation practice. The book is Search Inside Yourself. It is a practice being followed at Google. So in this book, one of the exercise, a lot of exercises are given. One of the exercises is, how do you separate yourself from your mental feelings? Because even in that book, they say that the biggest problem is I identify with my emotions. I think that I'm angry. Instead of I am angry, if I see that, okay, I have an anger feeling in me. See, emotions are always a dashboard in your system. It's a warning. It's an indication. If you take that way, it is perfectly fine. But if you get identify with that and act on it, uncontrolled fashion, it is a problem. So this idea is once you take away all the cloth, you see the crystal as pure. Thereafterwards, whenever you see a crystal, when a cloth is there, even though the crystal appears to be blue, I know that that's not the real state. So this sutra clearly tells that why Patanjali is forcing us to suspend all the mental activities at the seat of meditation, because you cannot do that 24/7. This practice is only to show your true nature and establish you in that true nature. And later point of time, once you know that, right, that knowledge is always with you. So this is to give you that knowledge that, hey, wait a moment. Typically, you take yourself as mental activities, but you are in fact different from the mental activities. How does that he prove that? He suspend all the mental activities, and with a clear practice in the chapter 4, he will take us to help us to see ourselves properly, and that is the state of kaivalyam. And once you reach that, thereafterwards, if you see colors in your crystal, you know that, okay, that color is a superimposition from the external world. So this sutra tells that when chitta vritti nirodha happens, the consciousness got an opportunity to see itself properly. That's the meaning of this sutra. Because without that, the consciousness will be always superimposed with the mental activities. So when you suspend the mental activities, the consciousness can see itself properly. So if you are in a movie theater and imagine that you are looking at the screen, the films are being projected. Okay, I get identified with one person moving here, there, everywhere. Suddenly, if you just remove the film, I'm talking about the olden method, not the new projections. What happens? You see that blank light. So that will give you the necessary knowledge that whatever that is happening on the screen, it is shown by that light. And that light is always separate from the images that are getting projected. The imaging that are getting projected may have sadness in it, anger in it, happiness in it. But the light projects everything, faithfully everything projects given to it. But that doesn't mean that the light is the emotions or what is being projected. So this is the idea. It helps you to see yourself. So once you gain this, what is the advantage? Don't you get anger? Of course, you will have anger in your mind. You will have sadness in your mind. All these vrittis will be there, but you will see them as separate from you. So when you think that you, means this is not yoga, but the modern positive psychology. The positive psychology tells, if you think that you have anger, that's a situation to be handled. But if you think that you are angry, that's a problem. So there is always a difference between a problem and a situation. A situation is you can manage it properly, but a problem means you get caught in that problem and that you will suffer. So this sutra clearly tells why I'm doing the Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Because when I do the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, I will be able to see myself properly. So that is what the essence of this verse. So if you connect all these three, all the words together, so Tada means when the Chitta Vritti Nirodha happens, when I was able to suspend all my mental activities. Drastuh, who is drastuh? We did a detailed analysis on level 1, level 2, level 3, and connected ourselves with the consciousness. The consciousness is the seer. When there is nothing outside to be seen, the consciousness will see itself. So it will have a clear understanding that the subject is me. And that is what svarupe avasthanam. So when the Chitta Vritti Nirodha happens, the consciousness will see itself properly, and that is the essence of the sutra. I want to quickly give a couple of quotes from some of the masters. You will see how beautiful they are, right? So Shankaracharya in Dridrishya Viveka tells, the form is observed. I is the observer, and means the form is the observed, the external form. For example, if it is a flower, flower is the observed, I is the observer. Level 2, I is the observed, the mind is the observer. And then the mental activities are the observed, the consciousness is the seen. So the observer is not the observed. This is Dridrishya Viveka, a beautiful book by Shankaracharya, which talks, one whole book talks about the difference between the seer and the seen. Brilliant. So much connected with this verse. Second thing is from Bible. So Jesus Christ tells, right? Blessed are the pure-hearted. Why? They see the God. Beautiful verse, pretty much aligned to this thought. Blessed are the pure-hearted. When the mind is pure, heart here is mind, pure and calm, you will see the inner self. There is a beautiful set of verses in the Bible. It talks about where is the kingdom of heaven, right? Kingdom of God. People say, Jesus correctly said, right? They say the kingdom of God is here, there, everywhere. But the kingdom of God is within me. And only when you do this pure heart, then only you will be able to see that. Third quote from Swami Vivekananda. Look at directly quoted about this verse. He said, as soon as the wave have stopped, just like when you do the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the lake become quiet and you can see its bottom. What a beautiful statement by the great master. So with the mind, when it is calm, you can see your nature. So we do not mix ourselves, but remain in ourselves. Excellent quote by the great master, Vivekananda. Perfectly aligned with this sutra. This is the third point. And Paramahamsa Yogananda, another great yogi, he tells when the consciousness is kept in you, it means God, you will have no fears. Every obstacle will be managed because you see yourself completely separate from God. These are, I thought it is better to show some of these great masters' quote regarding this. So this sutra is so good. Now, there is a common misunderstanding that the Christians are opposed to this idea. I really wanted to give a couple of Christian mystics. One is Saint Augustine and the other one is Saint Teresa of Avila. These two mystics are known for their meditative practices. So look at the Saint Augustine one, what he talks. This is exactly a quote from his writing. He said, I entered into the innermost part of myself, my mind, in my meditation. I entered and I saw that my soul's eye, right? an unchangeable light shining above the eye of the soul, above my mind. So he's talking something which is behind the physical eye, behind the mind. He who knows the truth knows that that light, which is the consciousness, who knows that that light knows the eternity. Loves know this. This is exactly what even every mystics has quoted in the world. Saint Augustine is known for his meditative practices and his mystic experiences. So the reason why I just wanted to show that every tradition talks about this. Apparently people may disconnect, but every tradition talks about this. And Saint Teresa, look at Saint Teresa. My soul at once becomes recollected and I enter the state, highlight the next one. I enter the state of quiet, or that is rapture. When I enter that state of quietude, I can use none of my faculties and senses because the Chitta vrittis are completely suspended. Everything is still. And the soul is left in a state of great quiet and deep satisfaction. From this recollection, something springs forth, and that is the greatest happiness. Look at these writings. Look at the language. So I always say that, right? If something is truth, it has to be observed by different masters at different times in different parts of the world. These great masters also saw the same thing. This is the beauty of these verses. It is universal. Remember, the value of the sutra literature is alpaksharam asannitham saravat vishwathomuham, universal outlook. Everybody has. A person who is not even exposed to this culture can see these things. These verses of these great mystics and masters highlight that. So with that, let's summarize the verse. So when the mind is mastered or controlled or suspended through the practice of yoga, you will experience your own true being. This is what it is. So as the reflecting medium of the self is the mind, right? Because if everything consciousness sees is only through the mind. If that reflection medium is polluted, you cannot see anything properly. Now, when you see yourself properly, when you distance yourself from the experience, what exactly is the benefit? Divine calmness, peace and tranquility, freedom from insecurities and unhappiness, and finally, uninterrupted content. This is what is promised. So that is why this practice is very important. So let's recap this verse. This verse highlights what happens when you do this Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is the verse we highlighted in the verse. He tells, you will see your own true identity. Now the next verse, what he does is, he tells, if you cannot get the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, what is the state? So it is a style of this Vedic scriptures. It tells if something is Vritti and Nisheda, right? If something happens, it is like this. If it is not like this, it will be like this. Then you will have an opportunity to pick and choose. So in Vedic culture, you typically don't see a set of do's and don'ts. Rather, it will tell you this: if you follow this path, this is what you get. If you follow the other path, this is what you get. That's all. Then it's up to you. So this is a beautiful sutra. So please contemplate upon the meaning. And with that, let's go to the fourth sutra. And after that, we'll go to the Q&A. Let's listen to the sutra.
vRuttisArUpyam Itaratra.
vRuttisArUpyam Itaratra. Again, 3 words. vRuttisArUpyam Itaratra. Itaratra means otherwise. What is otherwise here? Can you think through that? What is otherwise here? Chitta Vritti Nirodha is not happening. That's all it means. What happens? vRuttisArUpyam. Itaratra means when the Chitta Vrittis are not mastered or controlled. What happens? The seer identifies with the modification of the mind. Vritti, we already know what is vritti. Vritti means mental modification, Sarupyam means identification. You get confused with your mental activities. You feel that I am angry rather than anger in me. So otherwise, at other times, the seer is absorbed in the changing state of the mind. So let's go otherwise, meaning not in Samadhi or not in Chitta Vritti Nirodha. What would be your mental condition if the Chitta Vrittis are not mastered and controlled? Absolutely no mastery or control. Look at the lake. Very turbulent. Or it could be very dirty. So the mental conditions could be, it won't be Ekagra or Nirodha, but it would be Chitta, Vikshipta or Mudha. It could be destructive or deluded, or it is distracted. And what would be the dominating qualities? It will be hyperactivity, rajas, or inactivity. So misidentification with these mental states, that is what is having to happen. Strong attachment, strong emotional discharge. These would be the quality of the mind. And look at that crystal. The same crystal we saw in the previous slide. Right now, what happened? It appears to be blue. Really speaking, that crystal is not blue. That blueness comes from the cloth, underlying cloth. But you always think that the crystal is blue. And your reaction, everything is based on the fact that the crystal is blue. This is what this otherwise means. Itaratra, the verse means. So when I'm not in Samadhi, what happens? I do not have a healthy or a conducive mental state. A mental state which is not completely in control. And that is a destructive, deluded, distracted state, dominated by rajas and tamas. And that is not very helpful to me. So what is going to happen in that Itaratra state? So Itaratra states means what happened? vRuttisArUpyam. vRuttisArUpyam, Sarupyam means identification. With vritti. Vritti means, we already talked about that in detail, mental modification. So at this particular stage where I do not have control over my mental activity, when the thoughts, emotions of the mind are not in control, we identify ourselves with the thoughts in the mind. So we get ignorance of our true identity or the consciousness, distorted perception of the world, agitation, frustration, helplessness, stress, all these will come. One simple example. A lot of examples are given by the commentators. One example is, let's say that somebody got corona in the dream. Remember, in that dream, which body got corona? Is that your real body or is that the dream body?
Dream body.
Exactly. And the consciousness is aware of that corona, vritti, happening in my mind, in the dream mind. And when it identifies with that, as long as I live in that dream world, yes, it is a problem. It is a situation to be handled. But if the consciousness identifies completely with that vritti in the dream, it will be a terrible experience in the dream. Like that. Every time I get an experience, I get identified with my anger. I get identified with my everything, right? So instead of seeing that I have anger, I became angry. I became sad. Instead of seeing that as dashboard indicators, I get identified with that. This is the fundamental problem. So vRuttisArUpyamitaratra is the fundamental human problem highlighted by the yoga. So all these yama, niyama, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, samadhi is developed as a means to get out of these sufferings. And as I said, if you don't know how to drive your car, the car that could be a blessing to you it can cause problems for you. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo, the Upanishad tells. So like that, these misidentification, think about the dream. That itself gives you a simple example. And another example, a simple example. Those who likes movie, I like movie a lot. So I watch a lot of movie. So when you are in the movie, sometimes what happens? If you develop a deep attachment with that movie characters, you don't realize that, okay, I'm outside of the real world. I feel that I'm part of their life. I'm engaging with them. And a painful situation there becomes a painful situation for me. And I may even cry. But thank God, what happens? The movie is over, you come back to your original awareness. But imagine if you continue to live in that state forever. That's a problem. But if you realize that it is a movie, yes, you can appreciate it. When the dream becomes a lucid dream, what happens? What is a lucid dream? A lucid dream is a dream where I know that I'm dreaming. So you will start enjoying that dream. Every situation you will be able to face better. So the consciousness purusha in you is separate from a particular body and your experience. Yes, at this point of time, in this time and space, I use this body for transacting with this world. In my dream, I use my dream body and the dream mind to transact with this world. So at any point of time, I may use a set of body and the mind to transact with whatever is that state of experience I have. But I am completely different from that body and the mind. When I have that awareness, it gives you a lot of courage and strength to face any situation, including our own death. Otherwise, what is going to happen? If I identify with the corona in that dream, what happens? I will continue to suffer. That's the key difference. So if the Chitta Vritti Nirodha is not happening, then the thoughts, emotions of the mind are not in control. We identify ourselves with the thoughts in the mind, and we will be ignorant of our true identity and the consciousness, and we will have a distorted perception of the world. We always identify with the mental activity, and as a result, we may not be able to live our life properly. So the only way to get out of all the problems completely is by knowing your true identity. And that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, verse 11, Arjuna gives all these problems to Krishna. I'm in a very difficult situation of my life. I'm Vepatuscha sharire me romaharshascha. A beautiful set of description is given. And finally he said, okay, I cannot face my life. It is too difficult for me. At that time, Krishna is introduced in a most brilliant manner, right? He tells, Tamuvacha Rishikesha prahasanniva bharata. With a smile, Lord Krishna speaks, because he knows his true identity. He knows his true identity, which is beyond this body and the mind. And he introduced Arjuna to the highest teachings of Vedanta from verse 212. This will set you free from all the sufferings. And that's what Christ also said. Blessed are the pure-hearted, because they see the God, and that kingdom of God is within you. Every masters talked about this truth in yourself. So whether it is a Shankaracharya or Sri Narayana Guru, all these masters, there is a beautiful book called Atmopadesha Shatakam in Malayalam. It is composed by Sri Narayana Guru. That 100 verses talks about the nature of this purusha or the truth. We need to get identified with that. And now, don't think that by tomorrow you can get that done. That is why the whole yoga is given to you. It is a means to get that identity. And every step you make, it will benefit you in that perspective. Swalpam arpyasya dharmasya trayate mahto bhava. Krishna tells like this, don't think that this is a binary state. you will be continue to suffer till you get knowing these purusha. No, every small step you make, it will give you that much benefit. Another beautiful example given by the scriptures. Like, let's say that if the water of the lake is rough and impure, the reflection of the sun, what is going to happen? You will see a dancing sun, you will see a dirty sun, and you will see a disturbed sun. Honestly speaking, the sun is not dancing, the sun is not dirty, and the sun is not distorted. It's because of the medium that is got distorted. I experience like that. So the consciousness in you is always pure, it is always divine, but the mind, that because of these chitta vrittis, get distracted and disturbed, and as a result, the reflection of the consciousness also appears to be dancing and distorted. So once again, this sutra tells Itaratra, when the mental activities are not controlled, it is going to create, it means it will force you to identify with your mental activities apart from your true identity. Some more means this mistaken identity, right? So in the commentary of Yoga Sutra, so many examples have given by the commentator. See, when this is what exactly I'm using the Vyasa's statement paraphrased into English. Vyasa, the commentator, tells, when the ever-changing states of the minds are presented, the individuality in you get identified with them and thereby appears to be affected by them. The example given is, look at that first image. You see a tree in the water. You see the reflection of the tree in that lake. But in fact, you think that, without thinking, you may think that that tree is part of the lake. Honestly, it's a superimposition of that tree on the lake. Another example, that crystal. You think that that blueness is part of that crystal. Honestly, it's a superimposition. So when you do not know your identity, the external vrittis always imposed. Looking at a dirty mirror, right? You may get a dirty reflection. You may identify yourself as dirty. Honestly speaking, you are not dirty. It is because of the mirror that shows your image is dirty. Your reflection appears to be dirty. So that's another thing. So a lake appearing to have trees is due to the reflection on the bank. So the trees are on the bank, but the trees appears to be on the lake. So vrittis which happens in your mind, you get identified that, and that's the problem. That is the mistaken identity. Again, some of the reflections from the masters. So Shankaracharya, in another book called Hastamalakiya, he said, like, just as the reflection of the sun is agitated, water seems to be break up, but remains perfect on the calm surface. So too, the consciousness appears to be agitated. It's a beautiful verse. Again, Hastamalakiyam is another brilliant composition of Shankaracharya. And Christ also tells, right? The perceive is in heart as an abomination to the Lord. There are so many verses in the Bible also indicating this. And Vivekananda tells, get hold of your mind. The mind is a lake. Every stone that drops into it raises as waves. And these waves, these disturbances, do not let us to see who you are. This is in fact his commentary on the Yoga Sutra. So again, Yogananda also tells, every material desire, material agitation, it leads you further away from the bliss because you cannot see it. It's there in the slides. You can read that. So the summary of the fourth sutra is, when the mind is not pure, when the mind is not in control, we will not be able to experience our true being. Because the reflecting medium, the mind is corrupt, rough, and controlled. So the purusha cannot see itself properly. As a result, it gets identified with its own vrittis and gets suffering. So when at this stage, will result in destructive and distracted mental condition. It will be resulting in agitation and stress. It will develop fear, anxieties, and everything. And it will make you blind towards your own true nature. These are some of the characteristics of these states. So we saw two verses today. So the first verse was Tada drastuh svarupe avasthanam, where Tada means then means when you have the Chitta vritti nirodha. At that time, the seer, consciousness, will establish in its own true nature. And second thing is, if the Chitta vrittis are not in control, Itaratra, vRuttisArUpyam Itaratra. Otherwise, you get identified with the Chitta vrittis and get suffering. So this is that essence of these two sutras. Let's just listen to the closing prayer and then we can go to the Q&A.
Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.